welcome to the Photographer Diaries podcast. I'm your host, David Scott Bowles. On this podcast, we talk about anything and everything photography. Hey! Yeah! You know, I love this beat, and I try to get it on beat every time. I think I was pretty close on that one. But on today's episode, we're talking about something that I actually recently dealt with in a wedding, and that's dealing with other vendors and difficult people. So, basically what happened is I was working with another photographer, videographer. This was a video gig, and if you're not familiar with me or my business, what I do, I'm a portrait and wedding photographer. Primarily, I shoot weddings, and then I shoot portraits on the side. So I was actually working with another wedding photographer, another videographer. A friend of mine hit me up, was like, hey, can you second shoot for me? And even though I own my own business, and we talked about this recently actually, that I do a lot of second shooting, and I love to second shoot, and I don't think I'll ever get to a point in my life where I'm like, I'm done second shooting, I'm too good for that. And if you ever do get to a point in your life like that, fucking humble yourself. Like, sit back on your chair, humble your goddamn high horse, and just chill out, because no one's ever that good. You know, especially if you're helping a friend out, another creator. And there's a difference between too busy to do it and just I'm too good enough for it. Because I completely understand. I mean, if you have a very busy wedding business and you're shooting every weekend and you don't have the time to second shoot, completely understandable. But if your ego is way up there and you're like, I'm too good to second shoot, there's a problem. And I've dealt with people like that before. That's kind of actually where this whole thing is going. So anyways, so I got hired on from a friend of mine. I'm not going to be dropping any names in this episode because our community, even though it's worldwide, our community is really small. You're going to run into somebody eventually. So this particular photographer, so let me actually give you a little synopsis. So we showed up at 2:00 to this wedding to do details and all that other stuff. We show up, we're doing that. And on our timeline, it says the photographer is supposed to be there at the same time. So it's getting close to 3:00, and we're like, yo, where's this photographer at? Like, you know, we already shot all the details. We did the dress. And these are things that, like, normally you work with a photographer on because it's easier to gather all this stuff together, get your shots, let the photographer get her shots or his shots, and then kind of move on. So we had just finished up with the dress, and we are kind of like talking amongst ourselves, like, yo, where is this photographer? Like, where is she? And, you know, we kind of like figured out, like, okay, well, maybe they had spoken with the bride and discussed maybe another starting time or whatnot. And we're, you know, it wasn't really bothering us that she wasn't there. We were just curious. So regardless, photographer shows up and automatically is like, oh, I didn't know you were shooting this wedding, which kind of put me off, in the first place. But long story short, throughout the whole day, it's like, I feel like everything was an issue. We told her that we did details, we did hanging stuff, we did the dress shot, all that stuff. So we're like, hey, like, we did all the details, so whatever you need, you can grab it and do your stuff. And when I had mentioned that, it already felt like that was an issue. Like, almost like, oh my gosh, you did it without me? Like, that was like the response that I felt. Which was like, hey, like, or basically like, oh, what time did you guys get here? And we're like, oh, we were here too, da 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 da. And I mean, that was okay, but that was like kind of strike one in a sense, right? So I've worked with this photographer once. She actually hired me to second shoot a wedding for her, and I don't think that I did a bad job. I'm very confident in my photography skills, and I shot this wedding for her, and um, she didn't even keep me like the whole wedding. Like she's like hired me for X amount of time, and ended up letting me go early, which usually is like a red flag. And I mean, sometimes it's not. There's been plenty of times where I've hired a second and was like, hey, like I think I can handle the rest. Like, thank you so much. Um, but never got any feedback from her in regards to the wedding that I shot for her. I did see her post a couple of photos that I took at the wedding and posted them, and I never got tagged in them, any of that stuff, but that's a whole nother issue. But we're going throughout the day, and like I kind of talked to my lead who hired me. I was like, yo, what do you feel about her? Like, and I basically just put it like, hey, like this girl's really intense. She's very stern. For us basically keeping it PG, right? So she was like, yeah, I never worked with her before, like da 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 da. And throughout the whole day, like she's just bossing everybody around, like with straight attitude, like and that's just not how you go about the day. So I guess she was friends or acquaintances with the bride and groom or knew them somehow, but she's like dropping names and saying stuff about other local photographers and really just about our community and our town, which I get it. Where we live sucks. I'll agree. If I had a choice to shoot weddings somewhere else, I probably would. And I personally don't even market myself in my hometown. I try to market myself to like other areas. And but somebody who shoots weddings there and is a part of that community and markets herself saying that she does, kind of was off-putting. She was telling like the that's just a whole nother thing. We won't even get into that because then I'm going to be giving too much away. But going into it, like with this experience aside, it's always difficult as a videographer. And so I do photo and video, so I kind of see both the spectrums. And going into it, as a photographer, I've worked with some shitty videographers, like for sure. There's videographers who just set up in the middle of the aisle, don't communicate where their camera angles are, and then when you're shooting and you stand in front of their camera, they get pissed. There's been videographers who just show up and shoot, don't say shit to you, don't interact with you, act like you're not even there. And I mean, I've worked with like companies that was basically, we were supposed to be a part of the same team, even though we're contracted out, and like have had that happen. But as a videographer, when I shoot weddings, I'm usually like, the first thing I do is show up, talk to the videographer. Hey, what's up, man? My name's Dave. Da 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 da. Just let me know where your cameras are going to be at so we can kind of work around each other. Or if there's any shots that you want, just let me know. And it's all about communication. I mean, we're in this together. We're there for the same reason. We're there to basically, make sure that the bride and groom get an amazing experience, amazing product, and to be there and causing issues with pretty much every vendor is just puts a bad taste in my mouth, and not only my mouth, but like other vendors. When every single vendor is coming to each other and be like, "Yo, this photographer's intense," for lack of better words. Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to deal with the situation, and the reason this happened about 4 or 5 days ago from me posting this, and it's literally been bugging me that bad that I still made this video. Like, I wasn't going to make this video, or excuse me, I wasn't going to make this podcast But I feel like it was something that needed to be said. And maybe that would help me, but help other people that have dealt with this situation. So, if it's something that you've dealt with, leave a comment below or in the reviews on a podcast. Just go ahead and leave it. But like I said, I feel like the best way to kind of overcome this and deal with it is just don't let it bother you as much. Remember that you're there for the bride and groom regardless. You're there to make the best video or photos possible. And shit happens. Sometimes people just don't know how to act or interact with other people, and some people just aren't kind and aren't humble, and you have to kind of realize that and just go with it. And that's kind of, I feel like, what we did for the day. There was an issue where we had set up lights, and as you know, as a videographer, it's not like photography. We can't just crank our ISO and deliver a grainy photo and call it art. We need to have light, and the way the video sees is a lot different than photography, because we have a controlled shutter. And so basically we had one light. We had an aperture 120D way in the back, like long throw, like cranked up to kind of light the subject front light. And where they were sitting, it was just pitch black behind them. So we needed a kicker light or a side light of some sort to separate them. We didn't bring another aperture or anything like that, but I ended up having my tube lights, which are lighting me in this video. If you're watching it on YouTube, I had the Godox 60L or TLs, and I was like, you know what? Let's just throw it on a tripod and put it off to the side, and we'll get a nice, beautiful edge light. And we did. It looked great. It looked so good on video. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to bring these to other weddings, my weddings, and use them. And the photographer just lost it. Like, she came up to me and was like completely rude about it, and was like, what kind of, whose lights are these? What are these? Blah, blah, blah. Like, totally ruined the mood and the ambience. And instead of coming up to us in a professional manner and like, hey, is there any way that we can like pull these lights back so they're not in frame? Or, hey, do you guys really need these lights? Is there anything that we could do about it? There was better ways to communicate the issue. I have never lost my shit at a wedding to another vendor. You just kind of learn to work around it. You learn to, for instance, there's photographers that shoot on 35 millimeters when you're shooting video, and typically when we shoot video, we're shooting from the back of the room, telephoto lenses, so we can get that compression. And they're in your shots. You got to deal with it. You know what I mean? I never go up to a photographer and be like, excuse me, can you not use your 35 millimeter 1.4 and stand right in front of the bride? No, I just work around it and I just do my job. So that's pretty much it. So don't work, or what am I trying to say? When this happens, humble yourself, realize why you're there, and work around it. And honestly, just communicate. That's all it is. And communicate nicely. Like, there's no reason to be an asshole. There's no reason to be anything else but just a humble person there to do a job and get the job done right. When you're a photographer, you're there to photograph. You're not there to change the bride and groom's set, change the bride and groom's decor, and you're not there to boss around the catering staff or the event staff. You're there to photograph. And yeah, I think that's about it. But guys, thank you so much. I hope that you like the content that I'm providing. I'm sorry there was no video last week. Actually, Monday was the day that I shot the wedding. So it was That's why there was no episode, because I was preparing Sunday for Monday, and yeah, is what it is. So I missed a week, but I have to say that I'm pretty stoked. I've been very consistent on posting for the most part. This video will be up the following. Well, if you're watching this now or listening to this now, it's Monday. Happy Monday. But yeah, guys, if you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe, comment, turn the notification bell on, all that stuff. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, go ahead and leave a review. Send some comments or whatever you got to do. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.